About the foundations of the music business and how it began to become a business. Simon himself actually penned or co-wrote the lyrics to Dusty Springfield's "You Don't Have to Say You Love Me," and this is actually forms the beginning of the book. And there's a particularly a nice illustration of how songs were written in the States and how this contrasted to the UK. So Simon's going to read us a bit from his experience going over to New York in the 60s.
So this is really my first visit to America as part of the music industry. I'd had some success in the UK. I'd become the manager of the Yardbirds, which was probably then third biggest group in the world after the Stones and the Beatles. And I'd written "You Don't Have to Say You Love Me" with a friend of mine called Vicky Wickham. So suddenly I was at the top of it all, but I knew no more than I knew before I went into it. I was flying by the seat of my pants. And we went off to America to meet United Artists who wanted to sign us up as songwriters. And here was my confrontation with the American music industry. The man in front of me was a jelly gorilla. His short-sleeved white shirt revealed flabby runnels of spare fat flowing down the underside of his arms like melting liver sausage. Sitting at his desk, the top of his stomach reached right up to his neck. He was 350 pounds of collapsing flesh. How he could manage to pull all this weight upwards and get it balanced on two legs was amazing. But he did, and we shook hands. This was Mike Stewart, president of United Artists Music New York. Standing next to him was his sidekick, the company's vice president, Murray Deutsch, polished and petite like a life-size porcelain figurine. Just 5'7", Murray was packaged in an exquisitely cut charcoal suit with a perfectly knotted tie and a stiffly pressed collar. At the bottom of his suit, his shoes shone like black onyx. At the top, his rose apple face stuck out like a dollop of pink mayonnaise on a prawn cocktail. This was Mike Stewart's pet sycophant, a plaything for the boss. In the middle of our meeting, a shoeshine boy knocked at the office door. Mike flipped him a quarter and told Murray to have a shoeshine. "I don't need one," Murray told him, nor did he. His shoes were like mirrors. But Mike snapped back, "Murray, if I tell you you're going to have a shoeshine, you're going to have one." So Murray concurred. Shortly after his shoeshine, Mike decided that Murray should take Vicky and I over the road to see how the American songwriting business worked, which was taking us to the Brill Building, the famous building where all these songs were.
Vicky's the producer of Ready, Steady, Go.
She was the producer of Ready, Steady, Go and my co-writer of You Don't Have to Say You Love Me. Murray took us to a floor on which every door had a 6-inch square window to see in through, like prison cells. Inside each room was a pianist at an upright piano and someone else sitting on a stool beside them. Pianos were banged, melodies hummed, chorus lines sung, and phrases tossed around between piano player and stool sitters. There was no air conditioning. The temperature in the street was in the 80s. In here, it was more like the 90s. They all work 10 to 6, 5 days a week, Murray told us. They write America's hits. We want you to join them. But who are they, we asked. Who on earth agrees to sit in a little sweatbox and slog away at writing songs in such an atmosphere? Murray opened a door. "Neil," he said, "I want you to meet a couple of guys from England. They've just written one of the greatest songs ever." Turning from the piano, we saw Neil Sedaka. 3 years earlier, his song "Breaking Up Is Hard to Do" had been #1. So why was he slaving away in here? Vicky knew him. She'd booked him on Ready, Steady, Go a few months previously. "Neil," she said, "why on earth do you spend your day working in a tiny room like this?" He grinned. "Well, the truth is, I'm under contract. But that's not really the reason. It's just that this is how we do it, and we love it. We're all here, all songwriters together." Vicky shook her head in disbelief. Murray opened the next door. "Carol, meet two friends from England." The face at the piano turned towards us. It was Carole King. Carol had written one of the most memorable hits of the early 60s, "Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?" It was unbelievable that the reward for having done so was to be imprisoned 8 hours a day. Vicky knew Carol too and asked her, "Why do you work in a place like this?" "It can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes," Carol admitted. It was incredible, like a car factory, a conveyor belt of songs. Murray shut the door. "Burt Bacharach worked here until last year too," he said. "All the great songwriters do. We want you to join them." But we refused. We went back to the office and they were most indignant that we weren't interested. But This was
Can I
the
just, whatever
old-fashioned...
put you off?
This was the old-fashioned American music industry, and this is really how songs were produced way back 60 years earlier when we were talking about the 1900s. And it really hadn't changed. And in England, we had something new emerging. You know, the music business was swing in the 60s was fun. It was just us grooving around, get out all night at discos, doing what work we had to in the day, getting a hit song and using the benefits to have meals out and sex and dance. And the idea, you know, you'd apply yourself and go and sit and do something like that was just beyond belief. So we thought the Americans didn't understand the music business. We thought it was an English thing, and they just didn't know what they were doing. And off we went back to England. But shortly after that, I began to find out how little I really knew about it, and did start reading and learning about it, which is the forerunner, 50 years ago, of actually writing this book.
So once you did start to learn about it and how it worked in the States, I mean, this isn't so much covered in this book, but I would like to allude to it. You started going over to the States and meeting more of these obese guys chomping on cigars and selling them non-existent bands. I mean, how did that work?
Well, it's not in this book. In the previous book, there's a wonderful story. I had a partner, Ray Singer, and we produced records together. We produced quite a few well-known. We produced The Scaffold, and we produced Peter Sarsted, and his brother Clive started. Both of them had hits. And then one day we were asked, would we judge a music contest on Weymouth Pier? There were 12 bands. And we had been in America previously, and we realized that we could actually sell bands to America, and we thought we could sell a couple. So we went down to this thing in Weymouth, and they were all about the same standard, which was pretty low, and we actually gave every single one of them a recording contract. And then we went to America, and we sold every single one of them. But what we did is, before we went to America, we made some demos, not with these bands, just went to the studio and made some demos, and then we went from a record company executive, an A&R person, to the other, blagging them and saying, oh, we found the greatest band in the world and they're absolutely wonderful. But we hadn't worked it out very well because mainly we were just having a nice time eating and drinking. And there was one office we went into and we said we found the greatest band in the world, absolutely fantastic. And the guy there sitting, chomping, exactly what you said, big chomping, dripping, horrible brown stuff down his chin. Said, what are they called? And I said, Brute, and Ray said Plus. You know, well, which is it, guys? You know, so then Ray changed to Plus, and I changed to Brute. So actually, we made 2 records for him, one by Plus and one by Brute. Both of which went out, and both have got huge reviews. But the guys in the band didn't even play on them. We just got session musicians in, and we were quite ruthless and just made quite good records.
And did they actually go and tour the States then?
No, but there was another one we did in this same group of things, which really did do well. It was called Fresh. This was another band from the Weymouth Talent Contest, and they really were not very good. And when we got to the studio, we thought we'd use session musicians, which we did, but eventually we couldn't even use the singer. But he wanted to sing the songs, so we gave him a lot of hash, and he went to the studio and he sang them, and he couldn't quite remember what he'd done. When he went home, then Ray and some session singers sang all the songs. And we ended up with a really pretty good record. We really didn't know how to sell it. And so I think in an unguarded moment, I said, oh, this bloody group, they should all be in Borstal. And Ray said, that's it. Let's call them Fresh Out of Borstal. And so we called the album Fresh Out of Borstal. The group was Fresh. We photographed them in front of the iron gates at Crystal Palace in sort of grey suits. And it took off. It did really, really well. Mick Jagger actually bought 10,000 copies to send out as Christmas cards. It's very good. And we had to make a follow-up album. So, yeah, you can hardly call it a rip-off, can you? Except the poor band never got to play on it.
Did they ever play live?
And the singer never knew he hadn't sung because he called us later. He said, you're the greatest producers, man. I never sounded so good before.
And did he ever find out?
Well, I've been talking about it lately. He may, if he's still alive.
So it seems that you got involved with bands or managing bands under really sort of sometimes some quite odd circumstances.
Well, the very first band I managed, it was, I'd been an American musician and I got bored of being a musician. It was too narrow. And I threw my trumpet away and I hitched around to America for a year. And I came back to England and got in the film industry as an assistant editor, very, very lowly job in the cutting rooms. But I had a bit of luck because I knew music. When I worked in a film called What News Pussycat, and Burt Bacharach wrote the music, or was commissioned to write the music for it. And he'd never written a music score before. He had hits all over the place. He had all Dionne Warwick's hits. But he'd never written a music score before. And he didn't understand. I mean, he was my job as the assistant was to give him a piece of film for each of the places where the music would be in the film. And it were 50 places, which is normal, 50 sections of music. And he wrote 50 songs. And as much as they were good, that isn't a score. You know, a score has to have cohesion and run through the thing. But they had a contract with him which said they had to use his music. And he went back to the States the day after the recording. And the producer and the director sat in the cutting rooms looking utterly miserable. And I said, I could make a score out of that. And I had the time of my life. They said, you go and do it. And I took the two main songs, which was What's New Pussycat and another one called Here I Am, which Dionne sang. And I took the voices off and put on instruments and cut the music up into little bits. And I made a score out of it. And it really was the most fun thing I ever did. And I wasn't thinking much about Bert. I was just having fun. And actually, when it came out, he was reported to have stormed out of he saw it in New York. And he stormed out of the theatre 10 minutes into the film. But the next day, the New York Times said the cinema industry has found a new titan of the film score. So he talked to me again. But how I got the music business. All right, I made a lot of money from that because I worked in the cutting room non-stop for 6 weeks. And the film industry has a strange way of paying you. After 8 hours, you get time and a half. And if you had to work through another 8 hours, you get double your time and a half. And I actually stayed in the cutting room for 6 weeks. So every 8 hours, it doubled what I got per hour. And I came out with about £10,000, which is really like having 150 an hour, a huge amount of money when I was only 22. And I went and bought a Ford Thunderbird, a very, very flashy car, which actually cost in those days more than a new Rolls-Royce. An imported Ford Thunderbird from America, convertible, was more than Rolls-Royce. And it was a wonderful car because when you pressed a button, the boot went up in the air and then the hood went up and went into the boot and the boot came down again. And I drove off the first night I bought it to the Ad Lib Club, which was the trendy disco at the time. And an aspiring pop group apparently saw me arrive and presumed I must be a pop manager because who else would have a trashy car like this? And so a couple of hours later, sipping a big cocktail and nodding, and I can remember to this day it was Gloria by them. And I was sitting nodding, and this group came over to me, and I couldn't hear because you never can with discos, and apparently they asked, would I manage them, thinking I was a manager, and I was... So the next day they came to see me and said, oh, it's great, man, you're our manager. So I thought, well, I'll have a try. And that was it. That's how I became a rock manager. They didn't do very well, but the next group I did a bit better, and then the Yardbirds they saw how well I did with the second group, and they called me up and said, would you manage us? So, well, yes, please. And that was it.
And then in the 70s, you started to manage Japan, didn't you?
Yeah, that was another 20 years later. But in fact, I'd stopped managing. I did manage for 4 or 5 years. And I didn't really enjoy it because I really didn't know what I was doing. And I wasn't stupid about it, and I did quite well for the groups, but it was uncomfortable because I didn't really know what I was doing. And for instance, the Yardbirds, they probably knew as much about music or more than I did and had been in it for some years. So I changed to producing this. We got the stories out of order, but that's when I produced this record with the Ray Singer. And travel around the world, and I did produce all over the world, which was really great fun, a great way to see the world. And when I came back in the mid-70s, I was completely out of touch. I didn't know what was going on. And this group came to me called Japan, and they were all very pretty and lovely and had makeup and fabulous clothes. And I thought they've just got to happen. Who could look like that and not happen? They're going to be huge. But I didn't realise London was in the middle of a punk revolution, and nobody looked like that. In fact, it was 5 years out of date. But by then I'd signed them. And so I worked. I had a commitment. It took 5 years to break them.
And was that having them in Japan where they hadn't even released a record yet? I mean, did you start in the UK, or did you start elsewhere and really try to build them?
We had utterly nil success. I mean, the first album was total, complete flop. They weren't the right look or the right sound. It was the middle of the punk thing, and I jumped in and signed this group. But I did think perhaps because of the name, we could push up a little success in Japan. So I went off to, and they'd been signed automatically in Japan. They were with a German company here called Hansa Records. And in Japan, they automatically would go to RCA Records. So I went to Japan and saw RCA Records and told them that the band were really very good. And I noticed that in Japan, the young kids really liked, that they are afraid of tough-looking guys. They don't like, the Western guys are too tough-looking for them. And the only Western groups who were popular with young Japanese girls at that time were people who were very soft. There was a guy called Leif Garrett. He looked very soft. He wore a bit of makeup. Or Cliff Richard was popular with them too. And so I thought, well, the Japan look, all makeup and hair would be good. And they liked it. They all said, yes, this would be good. But the music's awful, they said. We'd never sell the music. So I said, well, why don't we just sell the pictures? And so we agreed. They were very good, very cooperative. And we formed a fan club. And over the next 4 months, they were the most publicized group in Japan. Every week, photographs in the papers, all the fanzines and the pop papers. And finally, the fan club was 30,000 people. And in those days, you must remember, there was no internet, there was no pirating, if a record wasn't released, you couldn't hear it. No one in Japan had ever heard Japan's music. But we had 30,000 fans, and they were obsessed. And then the record came out, and they rushed and bought it, and they were just beyond disappointed. There wasn't... Japan's music, I mean, it was unmelodic and strange and peculiar and wandered and wavered. I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying it simply was not pop music. It was sort of intellectual and strange. But an album's a lot of money for a 12-year-old girl, and they're already in love with the group. So instead of rejecting it, they all sat down and got to like it. So what we did is we educated a generation of 12-year-olds in good music instead of the usual Leif Garrett rubbish. And then when the band went to play there, they had this amazing audience who totally loved this music, which was by any means the sort of thing, if you were going to sell it, you'd aim at a 20-year-old university market. But we went and the first night in Japan, we played the Budokan, 20,000 people. The biggest gig Japan had ever played before the Budokan was at the Red Lion in Hammersmith, when 28 people turned up. And that was 4 days before we went to Japan, where they played for 30,000. It was quite a shock. But they went from strength to strength after that. And the great thing is we brought this youthful audience up with the music. So normally with a teenage band, they've only got a life of 2 years because the young kids who like them, as they grow older, they want to go into something more serious, and their younger sisters don't want their older sisters cast off. But because this band's music was so strange and so sort of intellectual, the fans stayed with it. And so we just got more and more. We got bigger and bigger fans. And even when they were 18 or 19, those 12-year-olds were still Japan fans.
And then you went back to Asia then with China. To China with you went to China with Wham.
Well, I'd fallen in love by Asia by then with Asia, and I'd really wanted to be in Asia the whole time. And Japan came about because I got a knock on the door one day, and it was a chap called Jazz Summers, who was also a manager. And he had a group called Blue Zoo, which had had a hit but had broken up. And at that stage, Japan had just broken up. So I was a bit fed up because it took me 6 years we're jumping ahead. But after the Japan thing, we did eventually break them very big in UK. And just when they got to their peak, they broke up. So he was a bit pissed off, and I was a bit pissed off, and he knocked at my door. And he said, well, we ought to go into partnership. And I said, no, I'm giving up. I'm going to go and live in Asia. And he said, no, we could be a great partnership. And he said, and I do all the work, you don't have to do anything, but I just need your name. I was a bit better known and established as a manager than him. And I knew that wouldn't work. I mean, if something happens, I'm involved in it, I'm going to work. But it was a good idea. And so we went into partnership. We made a list of all the groups or artists who were around who'd already had a hit, which we'd like to manage. We didn't want to start it's very difficult starting with a new group. We didn't want to do it again. And we made this list. There was Culture Club and Eurythmics and Japan, Wham were on there. And we went and met them all, but most of them had management. But Wham didn't have a manager. They were being managed by their lawyer, who didn't really know much about it. And so we managed to persuade them to let us manage them. But before we actually got to that stage, we had to take them to dinner, and we went to the Bombay Brasserie in London, and we sat down and had a dinner with Wham and with George and Andrew, who were very pushy and demanding. And George said, we want to be the biggest group in the world in 1 year. Well, to be the biggest group in the world, you have to be the biggest group in America as well. And no one's ever broken America under 4 years, because it's a very slow process. There was no national press then, no national television. Everything was local. The only way you broke was to tour America and then go back and tour a bit bigger and build your audience. And George said, I'm not doing that, and I don't want any photographs, and I'm not going to meet any DJs, and I don't like talking to radio producers. So, great. Very easy. And then somewhere in the third or fourth bottle of wine, Jazz or I don't know who, said, oh, perhaps we could make you the first group ever to play in Communist China. And George said, yes, that's good, fix that. And that was my chance, because I loved Asia. So I said to Jazz, well, I'll do that, and you stay in England and look after the group. And he liked nuts and bolts. He really enjoyed doing that. So it was a wonderful partnership. I went to Asia every month, and he stayed and did the work.
That was in the 80s, and I think that the 80s becomes one of the periods towards the end of the book that I really did amuse me. I mean, there were these really quite, I suppose, insane characters, but they were still involved in the music business. And
there was still the 80s, there was still some hope for the record industry. The 60s, the industry was run by. The industry was run by self-seeking, hedonistic people, but they loved music. I mean, the people who were most respected in the industry, Ahmet Ertegun or Sid Nathan or the Chess Brothers, these were sort of, let's not call them criminals, but they were all people who took advantage of everything they could to feather their own nest, but they did love music. And they did progress things. I mean, not as a well-run industry, but most of them were very concerned with being fair to black musicians and treated them equally, or even gave them preference, certainly the Erteguns, and even the Chess Brothers too. So that was the 60s, but mainly these were hedonistic people who were self-centered, but they pushed the industry along. By the time they got to the 80s, there was another breed altogether. They were much less music-oriented and much more self-oriented. And there were people like Walter Yetnikoff, who ran CBS Records then, and David Geffen, who came in with his own record company. But Yetnikoff, when he was made head of CBS, decided that the way to make a name for himself and become a big deal was give himself an image, was to go to war. And he said, I'm declaring war with Warner's. We're going to be #1 company. By then, Warner's and CBS were the two major companies. And for the CBS convention, he made T-shirts saying, fuck Warner. He made the entire staff wore them. I mean, he was very serious about it. Well, he pulled it off. I mean, 1 year later, CBS was the biggest company.
I mean, there's a scene in the book where you're talking about how he locked James Taylor's lawyer into his office and wouldn't let him out until he'd agreed to re-sign. But there seemed to be it's quite hard to find which of the stories of his excess I like the most. But I think there's the bit where he pretty much what he did with MTV. He accused them of being.
When Michael Jackson's big album Thriller came out, MTV had just started, and their policy was they would only play rock. But in actual fact, they were playing, because they were colour television, they'd fallen for British new wave music because they liked lots of colour. So all these British pop groups like Eurythmics and Culture Club were on MTV. Mainly because they had makeup and it was good colour, and you got colour TV, you want to sell colour TV, and it wasn't really rock at all. But they weren't playing Michael Jackson, and Yetnikoff was infuriated and said it was because he was black, which was probably the truth. They figured that the black market really wasn't. It was for the amount of focus they'd have to give it, there wasn't insufficient income. However, they denied that. And is that the bit you want me to read?
Well, I was going to do that, but then I thought I quite like this Bob Dylan story, because what was it? He couldn't actually get. He didn't want to threaten Bob Dylan and tell him that he couldn't make another religious record.
Oh, that was Dick Asher. Well, I'll read that.
Yeah, that's this. Let's find this 244. So, what's it? The Yetnikoff doesn't want to put Dylan under pressure himself, so he gets.
Dylan was threatening to leave the label, and Yetnikoff was very worried that he would leave the label. He didn't get on well with him, and he didn't want him. If he did leave, he didn't want to get the blame, and that if he did stay, and the records didn't sell, he didn't want the blame for that either. So he decided he would hand the job to his second in charge, Dick Asher, who would have the job of either getting rid of Dylan or keeping him, and would take the blame either way if it went wrong. Because it would cost a lot, and because it might prove disastrous if Dylan continued to sing religious songs, because that was the time when Bob Dylan had just caught Christianity and discarded his Jewishness for a while. Yetnikoff gave the job of re-signing him to Dick Asher, who agreed the money but laid down stringent conditions. No fucking religion. And when Dylan tried to argue, Asher exploded. And although I didn't put that in this book, because this book was written without me being in it in the first person, this was something I witnessed firsthand. I was in the office at the time when Bob Dylan's call came through, and Dick Asher had to take it in front of me. He didn't want to, he was uncomfortable about it. So this is something I saw myself. I'm telling you, Bob, there'll be no fucking religion. Not Christian, not Jewish, not Muslim, nothing. For God's sake, man, you were born Jewish, which makes your religion money, doesn't it? So stick with it, for Christ's sake. I'm giving you $20 million. It's like baptizing you, like sending you to heaven. You want $20 million from us? Well, you've got to do what we tell you. And what we're telling you is no Torah, no Bible, no Quran, no Jesus, no God, no Allah, no fucking religion. It's going in the contract.
So what was Bob Dylan's reply? Did he
$20 million, please. He never sang another religious song. Easily bought.
So what were you in the office for? Was this around the time of
It was when I was managing Japan, and we were trying to get them released there, and Dick Asher was sort of holding out and being difficult. So.
And was that, did Dick Asher then get his marching orders shortly after doing the Dylan deal?
Yeah, that was it. He was there to do it. I mean, the thing is, once he'd done the deal, it really didn't matter whether it was a good deal or a bad deal. Either way, Walter Yetnikoff was off the hook, and he could blame Dick, and if it went well, he could take the credit. So off he went.
And do you think those sorts of characters like Yetnikoff still exist in the music business? I mean, do you see any of them at all?
The record industry is so much on its last legs. It's got all place safers and people who are just trying to squeeze the last dregs out of it. And, you know, the extraordinarily exciting thing about the 80s and the fun thing, and these were mad people, is they were all trying this thing about Yetnikoff going to war with Warner's. He was determined to win. So he was signing every act. If an act on Warner's even half became free, Yetnikoff was down the road offering him double the money. And he threw money around ridiculously. When Paul McCartney was due to re-sign to CBS, Yetnikoff was so worried that he might not sign. And, you know, Paul McCartney loves publishing. He's got music publishing companies. So Walter just threw in a publishing company. He gave McCartney exactly what he asked for and said, how about if I, because McCartney said, well, I just think maybe I should check with Warner's first. And Yetnikoff said, no. And he gave them the Frank Lesser music publishing company, which is one of their biggest companies. And this isn't like giving 2 for 1. This is like giving 6 for 1. I mean, the company was worth more than the entire amount McCartney had asked for anyway. And then over at Warner's, they were doing the same. And the point is, you can't spend this much money signing acts, because the way record companies run is you've got your income from records, which is excessive. I mean, a penny's worth of plastic sells for £10. It's a 10,000% profit. So the whole record industry is built on this vast profit, but it still has to be used sensibly. You can spend a certain amount for signing big artists like this, paying over the top. You sort of know they're going to sell records, that's all right. You've got to spend another amount for marketing and running the company and building big buildings and cocaine and limousines. And then you've got to sign new artists. You've got to have new artists. And what they were doing is they're spending so much on these big artists that there was no money left to promote the new artists. There was money to sign them because they cost nothing. So they were spending all the money for promoting new artists, very dangerous. You were getting more and more top-heavy older artists. And even the biggest older artists, however successful, do eventually run out of softness. And to buy an older artist, it's like buying if you're in the mining business and you see a field and it's produced a lot of coal or gold or whatever it does produce, and you buy it. Now, are you 80% through the coal or 10% through the coal? You don't know how much more is left. And that's what happens with these old artists. Some of them just did one more album, some did no more, some they did all right out of. But what happened as the 80s went into the 90s, there was no money to promote new acts, and there became less and less new acts. And the companies began to fall on really bad times because of that. It was Yetnikoff and Geffen and these people and Irving Azoff who squeezed money for themselves out of the business, which left the business without enough money to continue as it had always been continuing.
So how do you see the business now?
Well, the music business, not the record business.
Yeah, the music
last year it turned over worldwide 68 billion, and the year before 64 billion, and the record companies tell you it's a disaster. Well, 64 billion doesn't sound like a disaster. If it goes up to 68 billion, it sounds very opposite of a disaster. But records are not going to sell. I mean, records are now an old-fashioned commodity. They're going to die out. And record companies have made their money from this vast markup. I mean, it's incredible. It's the biggest markup in retail there ever was. And there are a lot of downsides to it because, they really did see that you went into a record company, they sat in the boardroom, they talked about units. They didn't talk about artists and music. The artist was, you bought the plastic and you had to have a label and a song title or an artist. It was one of many things. And they didn't ever give them the sort of huge respect which an artist should have had. And now they're having to find out that they have to work like music publishers used to work with. Every time the record gets played, you get a tiny little bit of money, but it is played a lot, and then lots of tiny bits become big. But it's not 10,000% profit. And so record companies are really having to refocus and look at things a different way, but they own the publishing companies, and it's the publishing companies which income is increasing each year, mainly because of internet radio, which pays royalties for the songs they play. So the record companies are actually still grossing the same money, and they just don't want to think, but they have to. If the 68 billion being circulated by the public for listening to music, there's always going to be entrepreneurs who come along and find a way of getting that music and keeping it going. It's not going to go down, but it won't be the records. It will be something different, and we don't really know what yet. Streaming at the moment might change from that as well, but it won't go away.
Where do you see the fun in the music business then? I mean, that's part of the strap line of the book. I mean, are there any areas that you think...
It's definitely less fun, because for me the fun was, as a manager, you represented the artist and you went to war with the record company, just as Yetnikoff went to war with Warner's, and you battled them. It doesn't mean you hated them. They were the obstacle, and they were difficult. But they had the money and they had the power, and you had to wheedle it out of them. But right now, it's a very different thing. It's unsure of exactly how you move your artists forward. So you need a new generation of people who are thinking a different way. So for me, if I had an artist now, I don't really know how to approach it. I'm not managing artists. It's new and it needs new minds to think how to do it. But the record companies are all run now by the oldest people who've been there the longest time with the oldest minds, not thinking of anything new at all. And that's certainly why they're going to dry up.
And do you think that if you were starting out now, is there any part of the music business you would go into, or do you think you'd rather find some other field that would be offering you the lifestyle you enjoy? I think young people now,
if they're looking for the equivalent of where can I go and make millions and get laid and have fun, it won't be the music business. It will be maybe the games business or a whole range of different things. But the music business now is the music's still fun and people like making it, but they're not going to be these huge, vast artists and lots of opportunities to become one of them. The reason these artists were so big is just due to practical infrastructure. The major record companies sold records, and to get a record in the charts, you had to do something amazing. You had to get in England, a Play on Top of the Pops, in America, some equivalent amazing thing which is going to happen next week, and everyone will rush and buy the record. If they're going to rush and buy the record, they've got to be ready. So they had to press 1 million records at least and put them in 4 strategic warehouses around the country. And that's an awful lot of money. 1 million records, delivery to the record shops. They're going to invest 5 million on the basis of one little thing which is going to happen to publicize the record next week. They can't afford for it not to happen. So they worked and worked to make artists have the, it's not really the lowest common denominator, but the widest possible appeal. They watered down extreme artists, and it was probably good because the artists refined themselves and learnt the business and learnt how to improve the breadth of their appeal in a way they're not being made to do now. And they don't need to anymore, because a record company really doesn't, there's no difference if they sell now 1 million records by one artist or 100,000 by 10 different artists. They'll get 1 million sales, and downloads cost nothing to do. So there isn't that focus on bringing the artist to this huge, wide audience. And because of that, I don't think it'll happen again.
Do you think that it's leading to better music being made because people aren't?
No, I disagree with that. I mean, people say, oh, it's better now because the artists can make what they want, and they don't. But that's not true. It's that refinement which made the music so wonderful, that the artists really had to stick to their artistic integrity and find a way to find a real breadth of audience and to compromise. And the compromise, this is a compromise industry. If rock music is an art, it's not the music in isolation, it's the music plus the marketing. So the work of art is the recorded album in its record sleeve, in the shop, in its rack. I mean, that's your moment of art. So, no, I don't think the music will be better. It is different and more niche and usually probably less refined.
So I think that there's, I guess, the opportunity to access things you like has improved. You talk a lot about the BBC, for example. I mean, was it not the case that BBC didn't start broadcasting popular music until the Nazis were broadcasting popular songs from Yugoslavia?
The BBC, right through the 30s, it had this attitude to popular music. It was rather like a drink. It wasn't bad, but you didn't want to be listening to it all day. You were meant to be working. And they'd give you a little popular music late at night. You'd have a gin and tonic and listen. So right up until 1940, the BBC played popular music at 10:30 at night. And it would be a live broadcast from a band at the Savoy Hotel or something like that, playing for dancing. And during the day, you had to listen to a little bit more serious music. When the war started, the Nazis captured Yugoslav radio, which had a very, very big broadcasting band across Europe, and started playing popular music all day. And so the British forces started listening to Yugoslav radio, which was run by the Nazis. So the BBC said, this is no
like Hitler wasn't all bad. He led to the BBC programming some popular music.
So the BBC said, oh, this is terrible. The government told the BBC. And so the BBC introduced Music While You Work, which is half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, by a medley of popular tunes played by an accordion band, usually. And the army went on listening to Nazi radio.
And then with Radio Caroline in the 60s, that forced them to launch Radio 1.
Yes, Radio 1 was really the result. I mean, BBC had this pompous attitude at the top level, at governor level, to popular music. It wasn't something they were meant to be dealing with. And then they always insisted, we do play popular music. Well, what they meant by popular music is what was popular 50 years ago. They'd play Gilbert and Sullivan or something like that. Current popular music they objected to, but they were forced because of the pirate radio stations to actually do it.
And I think that just on that, there was one thing that, I don't want to go and say that the BBC are terrible, because I think there was an aspect of it that I really liked, that they were programming a lot of music from the States that was seen as educational, but that really got people...
Oh, no, what was interesting, well, there's always been this niche thing at the BBC that pop music is bad, just pop, but not... the blues and soul and things which have a historical or an ethnic touch are okay. And right through the 50s, there was a limit to how much popular music they could play anyway, because the Musicians' Union wouldn't allow recorded music to be played. So popular music had to be played by live bands. Records weren't allowed on the radio. But they could get permission to play records if they could prove that they were educational or historical or ethnic. And so right through the 50s, the BBC had a program every night, a half an hour's program, playing black Southern black music, which was blues, rhythm and blues, and country blues. And this totally influenced the young generation coming along, so that groups like the Animals and the Rolling Stones got their music from listening to this BBC music. This introduced that music to those people. So the BBC had a very important part to play in what evolved into rock music. But they were proud of that, because that was what evolved into rock music, not pop. They also supported rock music later, because when they started Radio 1, part of the deal with Radio 1, with the Musicians' Union, is it wouldn't be records. It would be the groups would go into the studio and they'd replay their records, so they could say, no, this is live music, we recorded it. I mean, the Musicians' Union was just concerned that musicians didn't get put out of business by records being played. But of course, the artists who were most able to go into the studio and recreate their records were the ones who were real musicians, like the Animals and the Stones and these things, not the falsely made pop songs. And so from the beginning, because of that, the BBC were helping what became rock musicians emerge from the pop pile.
So next time you hear a session on Vic Galloway's show, then you know what the origins of it are. You've got the Musicians' Union to thank. I'd like to bring my friend Dan from Withered Hand into the conversation, because we've talked a lot about writing and what's in the book here, but I was also really interested in having a bit of a chat with Dan about his writing and his songwriting. So I think, Dan, do you want to take this? I've been warming the seat up for you. And I've got my questions here, well organised. Dan's not feeling too good, but being the consummate professional that he is, he's still made it along tonight. The second person, Neil from Marceau, had a terrible back and actually ended up going to hospital for a week after doing our last Born to Be Wide event. So I hope this isn't a developing trend. But Dan, I think that for me, especially when I heard your first album, there was lyrics that no one else seemed to be doing, and there was some of it where you're like, fucking hell, you've actually said this, and played it to friends from Norway, and they just about jumped out of their seats at some parts of it. And let me go back to sort of one of the immortal lines is, how does he really expect to be happy when he listens to death metal bands? And coming out with a line like that in a really quite a gentle acoustic song, which someone's going to find for you in the meantime. Dan, when you're writing these songs, where were you pulling the inspiration and the ideas from?
Well, when I wrote the songs for that record, I was, I think I was like 32, maybe, something like that. And I just had, we just had kids, and I was thinking a lot about my upbringing, and so, in fact, that song was originally, it kind of span out of an idea that I'd had, which was I was involved in art, visual art. And I wanted to write this song, this graphic novel called "Knocking on Kevin's Door," which was based on an episode in my childhood, which I thought would be kind of maybe have some universal kind of aspect to it. But
so
I could
Kevin
never
a real person?
Yeah, Kevin is a real person who contacted me on Facebook as a result of hearing the song, way after the fact. And so I could never get past just doing the cover, because I'm kind of lazy, so just do the cover and that, and then in the end I realized that I could write songs easier than I could draw comics.
So this song started out as a comic?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unexpected.
Well, it started out as just the cover of a comic,
and then it developed into that. And what was it based on? Your experience as a kid?
Yeah, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and dealing with that as an agnostic in later life is kind of what informed that song, I'd say. And it's also got a bit of wanking in it.
Yeah, well, I think this
Which puts it in a very rarefied sort of niche of songs. You know, it's maybe a genre song.
Yeah, well, what's it? Well, I beat myself off when I sleep on your futon. I walk in the rain with my second-hand suit on. Now, just before we put it on, I mean, I remember hearing you say that you were going to stay at someone's house when you were on tour.
That's often the case.
And where did they have you sleep? I mean, did they actually offer you the futon?
Yeah, I've had to preface that song several times because there'll be times when I'm staying with like a fan or promoters, you know, and I sometimes have to say, it's cool.
Your futon's safe. So when you released this, I mean, did you have any doubts about recording this and having these lyrics, or did you have?
No, not really, because I didn't really think anyone would really listen to them. You know, and then because I was never really involved I found your talk very interesting, actually. You know, I'm fascinated by music now. Now that I'm a so-called professional musician, I'm fascinated by the whole thing. But it's an accidental. It's just a fluke, you know.
So how did people end up hearing it?
How did they?
Yeah, was it SL Records that put this out together?
That was a slow burner. I mean, the album cycle was like 5 years, I guess, because I didn't have any idea what I was doing, I guess. Yeah, and people gradually heard it. I also found it a personal challenge to get up and sing songs. So I carried on doing that the whole time, you know, until I was less freaked out. And then, and so gradually people would notice, particularly the lyrics, I think, and be like, what? What did he say? And, you know, I mean, there's a reason why that, I don't know, I don't really understand it myself.
And when you've written these songs, I mean, have you done them just for yourself, or have you actually had an audience in mind? I mean, by the sounds of what you're saying, you weren't really thinking of anyone hearing them.
There's a difference between the first album and then, you know, 5 years later, the second one, because I knew that there were people waiting for that record to come out. I mean, okay, like 5 people, but, you know, not so many people, but there were people waiting for it, and I still had to kind of grapple with what am I doing this for? Because I've already got laid, you know. I've already had some fun. I live at home with my family. I'm not really doing it to be sexy. You know what I mean? I don't take drugs anymore. There's not really a good reason for doing this if it isn't a personal expression. It's not like I'm going to make a lot of money, as you say. So, you know, it's, in a way, it is kind of singing to the birds.
And did you choose different writing material then, or different inspiration?
The second record was informed by the 5 years that came after the first record, really. And the first one was 32 years previous, kind of, pretty much. So I don't know what's going to happen now. I guess I have to wait another 5 or so years, which still... Recently got involved with the kind of tiny end of the music business after kind of being very wary of it for a long time. And I think both the labels I'm working with are very understanding that I'm not going to be chasing that with another record anytime soon.
So what are you going to do now then? I mean,
I'm just going to play those songs to people who've never heard them before and carry on for another 5 years.
What about the comic? Can you see yourself revisiting the comic?
I really feel like this is an interlude in my artistic development, and one day I'll go back and do my drawings again.
And what did Kevin say to you?
Yeah, I was kind of ignoring him. He was a very kind of tough kid, and we knocked on his door, me and my nan. we were evangelizing, and I didn't realize he lived there. And we opened the door, and it was like the toughest kid in the class. And my nan said, "Hello, would you like to live forever in paradise on earth?" And I was just like, "Oh man, please take me now."
What did he say?
He was actually quite compassionate at school. He didn't do anything about it.
And what did he say when he got in touch with you all these years later?
It was a few years ago now. He just got in touch to say, "I heard that song, and I remember. Did
he like it?
He didn't say. Also, I didn't really want to encourage a Friends Reunited type situation.
And I mean, did you have religious songs played to you as a kid? I mean, we
sang them. I used to mime, obviously.
And did that sort of stand you in good stead in later years? I mean, at least musically.
Well, it did mean that my head is full of like kind of half-remembered apocalyptic visions of hell and, fatalistic ideas. So there are some people who have gone through the new album even and picked out, I sometimes see this online, right? And there's stuff in it that I didn't even know that was in there. There's a lot of stuff that is religious in the new record as well, but not kind of overtly. But there's a lot of stuff kind of in there from scripture.
Could you see yourself just not doing that if someone offered you $20 million? Like with Bob Dylan?
I kind of live in the real world.
So I think that we're getting quite late, so it might be quite a good idea if we basically have we have you playing a couple of songs for us, Dan, before the curfew kicks in. But we're all going to be at the ready.
Is that couch a futon?
I wonder if it folds out. No, this one's safe. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Willson, Withered Hand.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to play a song called No Cigarettes. You and me could maybe use a lost weekend. I've been losing all my friends. Wave another empty bottle in your face. Oh, like I'm hitting it hard. That's just pretend. Like you're no, I'm not. I wouldn't know where to start. I've been here before. I went and got lost. Always the back end of our pantomime horse. All we seem to do these days is wave our arms and yell, and other people are hell. But that song you're singing, everybody hurts when everybody lies. Don't wanna remember too many regrets. And no cigarettes, 'cause I'm not a smoker, though I said I was. In an elevator stuck between the floors, it was bringing me down. Don't let them forsake you. No, rack them up and knock them down again. You're changing direction, I won't know where I was. Always the back end of our pantomime horse, and it's getting to me. Hold a leg. song I sing is in a minor key. I have to write them down, or I don't remember, then I'll get it wrong. This isn't a song, I'm thinking I'm not a singer like I thought I was. In the solitude before the applause, and it's getting to me. Hold delay, maestro, a drum roll, please. This is the golden age. Instead of religious songs, can I play a different song? Yeah. I want to play Cornflake because I played it on Six Music this morning and I totally fucked it up. So I like to put that right before I go to bed. Okay. I was trying so hard to leave out the swear bit that my mind got really muddled up. It's so bad. I've done lots of radio sessions and that's the first one I fucked up. This is actually the first song I wrote, really. So it's kind of fitting. So I broke another of the 10 commandments, and John Harvey Kellogg doesn't want me for a sunbeam. Won't you wear your sacrilegious undergarments, and we'll make out like we are 17. And can you tell me just exactly what do my dreams mean? 'Cause I think I saw your face before we met. It's like I'm living with a legacy of teenage LSD. So tell me that you love me or I'll forget. I'm not standing here for a lack of moral fiber. I get by with just enough and that's okay. I'd do anything to get my dick inside her, but that's not what she wants to hear me say. We're singing John Harvey Kellogg doesn't want me for a sunbeam. Singing people get together when we are all alone. So send me an instant message if you know what that shit means, 'cause I'm no longer answering the phone. We're singing John Harvey Kellogg doesn't want me for a sunbeam. You can teach yourself the miracles at home. Now I got a severe case of being in a real bad place. Won't someone help me roll away the stone? Oh, won't someone help me roll away the stone? Thanks very much. Alright, yeah, I'll play another song. I told my wife I'd be home. Okay. I said I'll play religious songs then.
Hey!
I don't really know what I should do. Like, should I be Like, should I be? I'm not worried. It happens all the time. Should I be passing this bread along to you? And I don't really know what the wine was for. 'Cause if it was Jesus' blood, wouldn't there be more? I'm knocking on Kevin's front door, I'm singing religious songs. I'm getting the words wrong, hair's getting too long for this congregation. Religious songs, I'm getting the words wrong, hair's getting too long. And they're singing, how does he really expect to be happy when he listens to death metal bands? La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. If as manna from heaven, man, you're disinclined to share. You stole my heart and I stole your underwear. You say religion is bullshit, it's all about metaphor. Well, if I need a fence to sit on, man, I'll sit on yours, dreaming of Babylon's whores, singing religious songs, getting the words wrong, hair's getting too long for this congregation. Religious songs, I'm getting the words wrong, hair's getting too long. And they're singing, how does he really expect to be happy when he listens to death metal bands? La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. I knew you so long, I ran out of cool things to say. Still bump into friends that we both had yesterday. When they ask me how I am, I lie, say I'm doing fine. They still manage to tell me on an easy lay holiday. Well, that's okay, remember, you thought I was gay. Well, I beat myself off when I sleep on your futon. I walk in the rain with my second-hand suit on. I beat myself off when I sleep on your futon. I walk in the rain and I'm thinking, if I happen to die tonight in my sleep, I'll have coming up blood on my hands. La